Welcome everyone to a very special video where we will develop two Python projects from scratch. The first one will be the word finder. We will develop a project that will try to search for a specific string that you are looking for in a large list of files. And that's going to be very cool to write because we are going to visualize it nicer by displaying different colors in the terminal when we find a match of that word that you are looking for. And the second project is going to be about the cryptocurrency finding project. We are going to deal with APIs and we will develop kind of a Python service that will bring us every second the cryptocurrency that you are searching for, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and any other cryptocurrency that you are following its value. So those two projects are going to be very fun to watch, and in addition, you will learn a lot from those projects because we will talk about the best practices when it comes to structuring your projects in both of those. So let's get started. Okay, so in order to get started writing this project, then we need to download some text files so we can test our logic on those files. Now, the way that we can do this is by downloading some already prepared text files that I came up with them so that we could have the same results once you are trying the code by your own. So if you will go to my code snippets repository, which the link is in the description, then you will find this directory, two projects in 24 hours. Under the directory of words.dir, I have 3 text files, which I will just open them now in 3 new tabs. Now, one nice trick that you can do in order to copy a large section of a file like this one is to go ahead to the URL and just replace the blob section with row. Now I'm going to repeat this with all those 3 files here that I have opened, but now this is easier to copy the entire text because the only thing that you need to do now is Ctrl A and then Ctrl C and paste it wherever you want. So I'm going to go to my project and I'm going to go to create a new directory like words directory separated by an underscore, and I'm going to create new file that is named words1.txt, and I'm just going to paste this in like that. I'm going to repeat that 2 more times. We'll replace this to row and we'll use a words2.txt file under the words directory, and then I'm just going to again Ctrl A, Ctrl C here, and I will repeat the same for the third file. Alright, so we are good to go from here, and now we are ready to write the Python code that will go ahead and start preparing the project. Now, one first thing that we want to get started with is to import the library that will be responsible to interact with a list of files. Now, the library is an OS library, which I also have a dedicated video on that library that maybe you want to check later as well. So first things first, we need to figure out how we can read all the files generically from the words directory folder. Now, one way that we should be doing that is first getting the current directory that we are right now on it. So we should be going ahead and first testing what is our current directory. So we have an attribute in the OS library that is called current directory in a shortened way, and if we were to print it, then you can see that it just gives us back the current directory, but it doesn't give the absolute path. It only brings back the dot sign, which is a known Windows sign for the current directory. Alright, so now that we have done this, then we'd also like to probably add it one more section, which will be the words directory. Now, a nicer way in Python to do that is by using the os.path.join function. So now we can give it a list of arguments, and then it will join those paths and it will reach the path that we need to read its content. So it will go something like os.curdir, and then we can just say words underscore directory, and you already see an auto completion, so it means that we are doing a great job. And I will save this under a variable that we can name files path like that. And now that we have done this, then we can go ahead and also try to list the files that are under this files path variable now. So we can go ahead and use another print line just to debug our results, and we can go ahead and use os.listdir method, and this one will receive a path, and then it will go ahead and list you the files that are under the given path. So we can give the files path and if we were to print this, then you can see that we received the list of the files. Okay, so now that we got this result, then we can allow ourselves to run a for loop in order to get the full path to each of the files. Now, the way that we can do that is by using a for loop that will go ahead and run over those list of files and will prepare the full path for us. So I'm going to use a list comprehension, which is just a nicer way or maybe a faster way to use a for loop that will only use one line, and it will also bring all the results within a list, which is exactly what we want. So I will go ahead and use a new variable that I will name it files full path, and this will be equal to a list, and inside of that we are allowed to write one-liner loop. So it will go something like f for f in os.list dir, and I will just go ahead and list all the content inside the files path. So now that I have this, then I can again try to debug the results, and you will see that this is the result that I'm going to have. You can see that this is pretty much the same, but you'll notice that this is a for loop. So this means that in the most left position of our for loop, we can decide what data we want to store in this entire list. So if I was to go ahead and change this f here to something like os.path.join, and then I will join the paths of files path and each one of the files separately, then we should be having all the full paths for all the files. So if I was to run that, then you can see that this is exactly the result. I have the full path for words1.txt and for all the files here. So this is pretty nice start. Okay, so now that we have something that actually does something valuable in our project, then it is a great idea to wrap this under a function. Now, in order to have a better structure in this project, I will allow myself to create a separated Python file that I will name it helpers. Now, usually when I name files with this name, then it means that it is going to have some functions that will help me to achieve the actual goal of my project. So I will allow myself to go ahead and copy the entire section here and paste this in here, and then I will also use a function that I can name it get files path, something like that, and then I will indent the results inside the function. And besides printing files full path, I will just return files full path like that. Now you can take this function one step further by deciding to return the files that are having specific extension, and the way that you can achieve this is by extending this list comprehension with an if statement. So I can go to the right side of this entire section here, and I can say if the iterated file, meaning the f dot ends with extension. Now you might ask yourself where this extension is coming from, and this should be coming from as a parameter in this function. So we can say extension, and we can set a default value for that, and later if we want to call this function, we can override this one. And now that we have this, let me actually display you the entire section here that does the list comprehension. So now that we have this function, then I can go to my main.py file, and I can say that I'd like to import all the functions from the helpers file. And then once I import this, then I can allow myself to use the if statement that will check if this file is running directly, which is a famous function in Python. So this goes something like if _name equals to _name main, then execute the function that we like to execute, get files path, like that. Now to see that we did not screw anything, then let me debug this with print. So I will run this, and now you can see that the result is still the same, but I can override the default value of extension if I want. Maybe in someday I would like to bring all the words that their extension are Python files, or I don't know, Java files or CSS files. So this is pretty generic and nice function, and this is exactly the approach that you should implement when you write functions in your projects. Okay, so now that we have done this, then I will allow myself to write one more function that will do the rest of the work for the purposes of this project. Now we probably want to write a function that will go ahead and really search for the wanted words in all those files and will bring us back a nice output. So I will allow myself by starting to create one more function here that we can name something like find word in files, right? Now this might not be like an English word, this could be just a collection of 3 random characters, but let me just call it word so it will be more understandable. And we can also receive here a parameter that we can call it string to find, something like that. And now that we are inside here, then first things first, we want to have the ability to read all the files. Now the way that you can do that is by using this function that we already came up with. So I can go ahead and say all files is equal to get files path, right? And I'm not going to touch the default extension.txt because this is what I want. Okay, so now that we have this, then I want to go ahead and start iterating over the files. So I will say for file in all files, and let me first see how we can read each of the files, right? So we should be going ahead and say with open and just open the file. So I will pass in the iterated value and then I will give myself reading permissions only because I don't want to write to that file, I only want to read the content. And this should be continuing with as if. This convention here using the with is known in Python as context manager. Now I do have a detailed video of what are context managers and what they do actually, but basically with this approach we do not need to take care to close the session with a file, and that's why every time that you will see a code snippet that is dealing around reading files, you will see the convention with the with keyword. Okay, so one way that you can read a file once you are inside here is with a method that is called readLines. Now, by readLines, you will receive all the lines in your file separated into a nice list. Let's give an example of it here. So I will go ahead and say lines is equal to f.readLines, and you can see that we have a method that is available here that is called readLines, and this will give you back a list with all the lines. Now if we want to test this until this point, then let me go ahead and use a print line that will print the length of the lines variable for each of the files. Now the reason that I do not print the actual lines, it is because the files are very large, right? We have like thousands of lines. So for example, for words 1 we should be seeing 1200 lines, as well as for the words 2 file, and in this one I think it should be 2400. Let me verify that one. Okay, so this is the case, and so this should be the result once we execute this function here that is called find word in files. Now let me set up a default value for this one temporarily so it will not throw an exception once we call it. But basically, let's go to the main.py file and now use this function that we came up with. So it should be find word in files now. Let me call this function and execute our program. And if we execute this, then you can see that we receive this result, which is pretty nice. Now we also see none because we tried to print the actual function itself, which was not necessary, because if you print a called function, then it should be printing the return value, and we do not return anything. So executing this in that way is a better approach. Okay, so now that we reached this stage, then let's go ahead and figure out how we are going to find the word that we are searching in each line. So now that we grabbed each line in a list, then we can allow ourselves to iterate over each line and check out if the string to find value exists there. So I can say for line in lines, and I can say now here if string to find is inside the line, meaning it contains the line. Like for example, str to find could be, for example, STN, right? It could be the collection of those three characters, or it could be WYA. So I'm just checking if the string to find contains the entire line. And we iterate over all the lines in all the files. So we need to do something with that data. If we reach this if statement here, if we enter this if statement, it means that we found a match in a specific line. So we need to do something now in order to display this to the users of this program. So at first, let's go ahead and only display the line to our users, right? So it will be simple. I will only say print line. Alright, so now that we have a basic function working, let's take off the default value here, because we really need to provide a value in this function to see some matching going on, right? So if we go back to our main.py file, you can see that this function expects for a value. So let's give it a value, right? Let's give it a value like Jim. Let's try to see if my name is somewhere in those files. Alright, so now if we go to our terminal, I actually want to execute this from the terminal because it will be a better visualization. So I will maybe make this smaller, and now I will say python main.py. Let me clean this one and again try to do that. Main.py like that. So you can see that we have some results, right? We have some lines that are including the Jim string. Now in this one, for example, you can see that this one is here, and in this long line you can see that this one is here and this one is here. Now obviously we are not going to leave it the way it is, because we need to somehow emphasize the match, right? We need to display it to the users where the match actually is, because it is very hard to find where the match is actually is. So one of the first things that we want to make better in this project is the coloring. We want to give a different color for the exact match of the line. Now this could be tricky to achieve this, but there is actually a simple way that we can go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm back in my main.py file, and I intentionally commented out the line that executes our function because I want to first display you how you can just display a text in a different color in a terminal. And this is sometimes a tricky topic that is hard to deal with, but there is a convention in the standard output that you can use something that is called ANSI colors or ANCI colors. And what this means that you can put some special characters before and after the text that you want to visualize in a different color. For example, let's take this example here. So you can see that we have the text of this is red, but we have some weird characteristics in the left and the right side. Now, what is going on here? So there is a convention in terminal world that you can just go ahead and escape some characters by providing in the characters of /033, and then you can provide the value of your color. Now this square bracket 91M is just a convention for a red color, and this square bracket 0M is a convention for white color. So by writing this entire expression, this will basically go ahead and replace the regular known color, which is 0M, with 91M. So what that means? It means that now we should be seeing this is red in red color if we go ahead and print this in our terminal. So let me try to do that here. So I'm going to bring our terminal here, and I'm just going to execute the program again. Let me clean everything and use python main.py. And you can see that this is exactly the result. Let me run this one more time. So you can see that we see this is red, and we actually see the red color. So this is the convention that we should follow if we want to display the matched character in a different color. Now let me show you a nice thing here. If we go ahead and change the 91 to 92, we should be seeing green. And if we do that with 93, we should be see yellow. So let's go ahead and maintain a dictionary where we can actually give a key as the color name, and the value will be these weird characteristics that you see now, so we can prettify the decision which color we want to use for the matched words. So I'm going to go to my helpers.py, and now I'm going to use this and this side by side so we can understand what is going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and use here a new variable that I will name colors, and this is going to be a dictionary. And my first key value pair will be red, and my second one will be base. Base just stands for white, just no color change, right? And the red value is going to be this statement, right? So I'm going to bring this, cut this from here and paste this in, and for the base one it should be that value, right? So now I will allow myself to delete this from here and uncomment this back and just leave the main.py file as it is. Let's close it out. All right, so now that we have this, then we need to somehow replace the matched str2find with this convention here that we just saw previously from this file. And the way that this is going to work, we are going to just create a new variable that we can say matched underscore line underscore prettified. So this is a good name to use here in this variable, and this one is going to be equal to the following. So I will say line dot replace, and what exactly we'd like to replace, right? So we'd like to replace the found characters, the found word, with the str2find, but in the left side we are going to use our color here in the left side, and in the right side we are going to use the base color. So this means that we should be going ahead and saying here formatted string, right? Let me write this again. So in here it will be, for example, red, and then we will have our original string here, and then we will have base again. Now, of course, I'm not going to leave this the way it is. I'm going to refer to my dictionary here, and then once I will say colors and access the key of red, then it will bring this value here, and this should be 9.1 actually. So I changed this earlier to show you the yellow color, so this should be 9.1. Alright, so now that we have this, then let me refer to the colors and then to the red value, and I should be doing the same for colors, square brackets, base, like that. And now that we have this, now it's a great time to go ahead and say print matched line prettified, right? Now I know that this is an area that you might see some things that are not working, and this is fine because those characters are pretty weird here. So feel free to visit the entire code from the repository of those two projects that I am preparing for you, and just copy the statement from here and there, right? Because if you have even one character that is wrong, this is just not going to work. Alright, so now that we have our program, it is about time to test if that's going to work for us. So I'm going to make this bigger, and I'm going to say again python main.py, and you can see that this is the result, right? We see the matches in a different color, and that is now perfect. We can really see where the match is in each line, and that's what we wanted to achieve here. Now, in addition to printing the line that we see that there is a match, we'd also like to provide an information which one of the files the match has been found. So this means that in the matched line prettified, we need to take some additional actions. And the only thing that I'm going to do here is to use the syntax of the path to the file separated with a colon. So first things first, I'm going to just, in the right side, leave the matched line prettified, but in the left side, in order to also display in which file we found the match, then I am going to just say here file, right? The reason that I can say file, it is because this is the iterated value that I use for each one of my files, which is coming from those two lines, right? And the for loop starts from here. And that's just more prettier because we probably want to know where the match is, right? On which file the match is happening. Alright, so now that we finished this function, there is going to be one more nice action that we like to take in order to prettify this project. Now you can see that, for example, in this file, we have an option to go ahead and just provide in the string define. Now it doesn't make sense to always go ahead to your Python files and change the code accordingly depending on what string you look to find. So that's why we need to somehow accept additional arguments when we go ahead and execute our program from the terminal. And it could have been nicer, for example, if I could go ahead and say python main.py gym, like that, right? And there is a convention, there is a known convention to grab the argument, which is the keyword right after the file to execute in Python. And that is achievable by the library of sys. Now I'm going to show you how this is going to work. So first things first, let me comment this out and let me display you the attribute of argv like that. Now in that stage, let's just leave it as it is and really try to pass in an argument of gym, and let's see the result. So you can see that we receive a list back where the index 0 is the file itself, and that is useless because we always want to pass in the name of the file, so it means that we don't have anything to do with the index 0, but we do have valuable information in index number 1. So that's the way that I'm going to try to access this provided argument. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to now delete this, and besides passing here gym, I'm going to go with something like the following. I'm going to say str to find is equal to sys.argv index 1, and then I'm just going to pass in this value here. And now that we have this, then I can execute this the way it is, and you can see that we have a wonderful result here. We see in the left side, let's make it smaller, we see in the left side the path, and in the left side we see the matched result. Okay, so now let me show you some bug that we could have until this point. If I was to execute this without providing an argument, then you can see that we kind of see an unfriendly exception, right? We don't see a friendly exception that tells us please provide an argument, something in that kind. So what that means? It means that we can use try except to catch the index error exception in case that an argument was not provided. So that means that I can go ahead and use here try, and I can try to grab the index number 1 information, and then if nothing fails, then I can allow myself to execute that. And if everything works, then it means that I can just leave the try block as it is. But if we are going to hit the index error exception, then I'm just going to print please provide an argument in the execution. A simple message that a user can understand that he needs to provide something. And let's, you know what, let's use here one more line. Let's use \n to space, and let's use example python main.py foo, just to really tell the user what he needs to do to execute this program successfully. And I'm going to save that, and now I'm going to execute that again, and you can see that we have a great exception, a friendly exception that anyone can understand. And I'm going to clean everything here. I'm going to run this one more time with different characters. Let's use something randomly, I don't know, ftr, something like that. You can see that we see the results. Let's try to use 4 characters here to have less results so we can see it more clean. Let's try to go with one more letter here. You can see that it works pretty well. We have one match in this line here. Now, one more thing that we can do is do this to even prettify it more is to add the number of the line. And that is something that, of course, is achievable as well if you will take your for loop to another level where you will grab also the number of the line. So there are no limits that you can go ahead with this project, but this is definitely a robust and a strong project that covers all the areas that it needs to cover in order to achieve the goal, which is to finding the matched characters in a large list of files. Now, don't forget that you can also play around with different colors here. You can decide that you want green or yellow. You can go ahead and add a green and yellow key value pairs here. You can also decide that you'd like to receive the color as an argument to even make it more generic, this great program. Let's try to now use this with the green color and change the code here in line number 25. And if I was to go back to my terminal and again search for a match, then you can see that the matched characters are now in green color. So that will be about this one. So let's go ahead and develop even more advanced project right now, which will be even more exciting and more fun than this one. So in the second project, we will start learning to write the crypto scraper, which is going to be a cool project that will go ahead and read data from the internet to bring you the values of some popular cryptocurrencies. So it means that we are going to deal with external libraries that is going to help us to read data from websites, and also we are going to do this object oriented. So it's going to be very cool to look at how this program could be implemented object oriented. Okay, so before we write some code in this main.py file, let me in addition go ahead and create another file that we can name it something like crypto scraper, and we will maintain our class in that file. Okay, so say that you work from your home machine and you want to write some code that will go ahead and read the data from some web server. So usually when we do something like this, then it is understandable that we will receive a lot of HTML tags as a response, because that is how a website is structured. But there are some special services like API that will allow us to receive back JSON responses. So this means that we will receive a lot of key value pairs that we can work with, and that is much more friendly to use because it will allow us to work with data like cryptocurrency values. So this is the magic behind API, and of course this goes much deeper than that, but I believe that this explanation should be enough to proceed with this video. Alright, so there are a lot of websites that provide a nice API that we can work with. I chose to work with IEX Cloud, which is a comfortable website in my opinion, so I will quickly create an account here because this is necessary, and I will say that it is my individual account. And now the process here is just basically providing your information, and make sure that you write in here an email that will allow you to go through email and just confirm your account. And once you have done this, then you will go inside a nice dashboard and we will continue from there. Okay, so after creating an account, make sure that you scroll down and you click on the section down below that says get started for free plan, and once you click on that, it will take a few seconds after this page is being loaded, and then we will continue from there. Okay, so this should be the page that you should see right after it. But now you also have to go ahead and verify your email address. So do that very quickly. And once you do that, then we can continue on to this nav bar here, which says API tokens. Now I will refresh this, and meanwhile I will verify my account, and then we will see a total different page. Okay, so now I will refresh this one, and you will see that I will receive a totally different page, because meanwhile I verified my account from my email address, so this should be good to go. And now that we have this page, then let's go ahead and see how we are going to read the actual data from this website. Now when we work with APIs, then usually this means that we should have some documentation that will explain us which URLs we should be trying to read in order to receive the expected data. And if you remember, the expected data is a JSON structured data. Now, for example, if I will bring in the homepage of iexcloud.io and I will try to write some code that will read this web page, meaning the homepage of this website. Let me actually duplicate that and go to the homepage. Then we will receive HTMLs, and in order to show you that, then let me quickly go ahead and create a request that will perform this one. So I will go to my project back. Now there is a very popular library in Python that is called requests. So I'm going to import that, but take a note that this should be pip installed. So you must run pip install request in order to work with that library. And now that you have done this, then now we can just go ahead and say req, for example, is equal to request.get, and then between those double quotes here we can just put our URL, and this should be enough to see what this website is about and what data it gives us back. Now actually we should be accessing the text attribute, sorry for the confusion here, but now I can totally go ahead and say print req, and we will see some results. Now you know that already we will receive some HTML results because we actually need to give here a URL that will be very specific, that will allow us to receive that JSON response that we are looking for. Well, for each website that provides you the API services, usually it comes with a documentation that explains you what URLs you can try to access to receive JSON data. And this is in this page for this IEX Cloud platform. You can just say /docs/API and you will have this documentation. So you can see that it says here API reference, we support JSONP for all endpoints, and it has very valuable data that you can go ahead and take a look on your own time. But for now, I'm just going to reveal the URL that will allow us to receive the Bitcoin value, for example. And the URL that I'm pasting here right now could be found in the description. So make sure that you bring that from the description. I'm just going to paste this here. So now you can see that it is cloud.iexapis.com, because this is a totally different service that this entire IEX platform provides us. And if I was to go here, then you can see that we receive a response that is quite weird that says to us an API key is required. Well, you remember that I went into that page that showed us the API tokens. Well, for each account you have an API key that you need to provide in. And if we will actually go back to that website we were in a minute ago, which will be this one, iex.cloud.io console, then we can navigate to the API tokens and get our API. Of course, you can create more API tokens if you want, but I will use this public one, and I will just go ahead and say $token equals to the token that I just copied. And if we do this, then you can see that now we receive the response back. So, and you can also see that this is obviously a JSON that is very, very workable with Python, because you can convert it to a dictionary and it will be very easy to work with it. So that's going to be the URL that I'm going to base on a lot throughout the project. And now let's go ahead and take this to PyCharm to continue our project. Okay, so let's go ahead and start writing our class in the other file, CryptoScraper. Now I'm going to refer to a class as a piece of data that will be responsible to initialize some objects, and those objects are just going to describe each cryptocurrency that I want to be reading its data every second. So that's why I want to design a class, so you will also see how classes could be valuable when you develop such projects. Okay, so we will start by saying class CryptoScraper. And I will just go ahead inside here, and of course there is going to be some values that I will be receiving in each object that I instantiate. So I will go ahead and write my _init method, and we can just go ahead and receive a parameter like symbol. Symbol being things like BTC or ETH for Ethereum. That's why I receive this value, and I'm just going to say here self.symbol is equal to symbol, like that. Now, if we actually go ahead and temporarily in the line here, we copy the URL that gave us this value, then we can understand that we need to do some string manipulations in order to not have this hard-coded URL here. So what I can start doing here is first understanding that this is the symbol that I'm looking to make more generic in my program. So I can take this section in here and I can use it as a class variable. I can say that this base URL variable is equal to that string. And now I can go ahead and just design some function that will give us the complete URL, and that could be a method or it could be just a property that you can go ahead and create. Now, if you don't know what properties are, you are more than welcome to watch a specific episode in my OOP series, and you can take a look in the description if you want to watch this one. Okay, so I will say that I will create a new property and I will call this one complete underscore URL, and it will receive self, and I will just return a formatted string that will start with the cryptoscraper.base URL, and it will continue with a /, and now I can refer to the value of self.symbol, right? I can go ahead and say self.symbol like that, and add one more / price, and then a question mark, and then token equals to some value. Now, this value temporarily is going to be stored as a variable here, but later on we are going to see what are the best practices to maintain secrets in projects. So temporarily I'm going to say that this is equal to API key, and I'm just going to cut this section from here and create a variable that is called API key right here. Of course, this should be a string, and I will delete this section right now. Okay, so now that we came up with this, we also need to figure out some more pieces of data that you would assign to a crypto object. Now, of course, each crypto object that you want to instantiate will have its own price. So this means that it also makes sense to go ahead and have a property or just an attribute that is read-only, we can call it in that way as well, that will give us the price back. So this means that we can allow ourselves to write one more method with this property decorator that will go ahead and do some actions for us. And those actions should be the exact actions that we described in this main.py file here, that we went ahead and created a request that gave us back the value of the symbol that we wanted. So I can go ahead and say that I want to create one more property, and I will just say price. Let me delete this @ sign from here, and this should return something. So we just auto-generated this function. So add property def price receive self, and will return something in the future. So let's go ahead and start here by saying req equals to request.get, and of course we should import this library here as well, and I'm going to of course delete that from the main.py file. But for now, let's go ahead and use this complete URL, which we can just give it here, self.complete URL. And if you remember, we should be accessing the text attribute once we complete a request. Now, if you remember, this was responsible to give us a response that was looking like the following. So it said to us that it will give the price and the symbol. Now, we really don't want to do anything with the symbol, but this one is very valuable to us. So now we can go ahead and just try to work with this data. I can go to my PyCharm here, and we need to do some work here in our request that we perform. Now, there is a good way that you can read JSON files when it comes to performing a request, and that is achievable by changing the way that we receive the final data. Now, this will give us the entire data just as a string because we use the text here. But if we were to use a method that is called JSON, then this will automatically know how to parse the JSON data. And this means that this method will convert the JSON data, should be JSON data, to a Python dictionary. And that is very valuable because it will allow us to basically work with dictionaries, which is very familiar to us. And the only thing that we need to do now is return req.get, and then we should be using the key of price here. Now, if we take a look here one more time, then you can see that this is the key name, so that's why I'm accessing it. But this value here is a string, so we need to handle this, and it might be a great idea to convert this into a floating number before we go ahead and test this out. So I'm going to say float and wrap this entire expression, and now I want to test if that's going to work. So I'm going to go to my main file, I'm going to clean everything from here, and I'm just going to say from crypto scraper import crypto. Now I realize that the naming of this class could be better here because we represent cryptocurrencies, so we might want to call this maybe just cryptocurrency or symbol, whatever you feel that it is best to describe this class, but I will change this to cryptocurrency because this is not the data that represents scraping. And I will go ahead and change this here as well. And now I will go ahead and say if double underscore name equals double underscore main, and we already explained what this if conditional does in the previous project. And if that's the case, then we are going to say cryptocurrency, and we will give here symbol equals to BTC USD, right? Because that was the symbol that gave us the value that we are looking for. And just to test this, I'm just going to say something like symbol 1 is equal to that one, and I'm going to go ahead and say print symbol 1 dot price. Now once we have this, then we can go ahead and try to run our program, and you can see that we received the value of Bitcoin, which maybe dropped by $24 in the past few minutes, but this is good work from us. We done a great work, and we can now go ahead and make this program more dynamic to support showing even more cryptocurrencies. And now we can go ahead and write some code that will be responsible dynamically to show even more symbols. Now be aware that you cannot exceed the limit of 50,000 requests in a month, otherwise they will probably ask you to put in a credit card, but you can decide to do that if you want to use the full services of this great platform, but just be aware that there is a limit for each month. Okay, so now that we have done this, then let's go ahead and make this a program that will always execute on our system so we can be aware of the changes. Now of course I'm going to use here some while loops, but I'm aware that I will not exceed the 50,000 requests per month, since this is an account that will only show how this is going to work for the purposes of this tutorial. So let's go ahead and start by saying here import time first, which will allow us to wait a second between each request that we perform. So now we can go here inside of it and we can say while true, and then just go ahead and do the actions that we want to do, and then wait a second before you continue. So I'm using the method of sleep and give the argument of 1. And now that we have this, then I like to execute this down from the terminal. So right click on the project directory and then go to copy options and then copy the absolute path. Now bring in your terminal and just use the cd command and your right mouse click to just paste the path, and then you can just go ahead and say python main.py and the program will execute for you. Now you can see that the request is performing now every second, and you can see that the result is good because every time that we perform a request, the value changes. So the changes are really drastic when it comes to Bitcoin, but at least our program works. So now we performed more than 10 requests. So let's stop that and continue with our project. Okay, so now we need to think how we can display some more cryptocurrencies, meaning that displaying more than one cryptocurrency here. So in order to do that, of course, we are going to create some instances. But until now, our design is pretty poor because for each instance that we want to create, we also should go ahead and use a print line to display its price. So that's why our class needs some more work. And that's why I'm going to go here and I'm going to start writing some methods in order to overcome this and make this one more generic. Now, it could be a great idea at first to have a list that will store all the prices for all the cryptocurrencies generically. And that's why it might be a great idea to go ahead and start creating a method that will look like add prices to list, and we will create the list of the prices later on, But first, let's go ahead and work on that. So now we can easily just pick a list that we can create from scratch and just add the self.price to that list because we have this property here. So the best way that we can do this is obviously going ahead and creating one more class variable that will store this valuable information for us. So this is where you can create your class variables. So I'd like to go ahead and use here one more, and I will say prices equals to an empty list. And now I can refer to it from the class, and I can say cryptocurrency dot prices dot append, and I will pass here self dot price like the following. Okay, so now that we have a list of all the prices, then we can think of a nice way to displaying this to our users. Now, one library that I like to use is Pretty Table that gives you just a nice visualization in the terminal so that we will have columns and rows where each row could represent a cryptocurrency. So the way that's going to work is by importing a library that is called, let's do it with from. So from Pretty Table, import Pretty Table like that. Now this should be pip install. So you should go ahead and say pip install Pretty Table, and only after that try to go ahead and import this Pretty Table class specifically, and it should work for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and learn how we can use this class now. So in order to display all the prices in one table, then it might be a great idea to not creating a method that will be an instance method, because the method that we want to write now should be responsible to grab all the prices and just add them to a table so we can display it. Now that's why we're gonna need to use the static method approach rather than creating a regular instance method. So that's why I'm going to say static method here as a decorator to my next function, and I'm going to call this prices table because this is what we are going to do here. And the way that you can start working with the Pretty Table is first creating an instance of the class. Now I will go ahead and just say pt equals to Pretty Table, and now you can see that it expects for some arguments. Now, as we know, each table is divided into columns and rows, and so it is expected that this table will receive the name of the rows that we want to display in the table. So that's why I'm going to pass my column names, and it accepts a list of strings where each string will be a column. I will start with one column right now, and I will name it prices. And now that we have this, then we can go ahead and add some rows. Now there is a special method that receive a nested list as an argument, and I will show how it is going to work, but let's go ahead and see this method. So you can see that it says here add rows, and if we go and read what this method does here by pressing on Ctrl B, then you can see that it says to us rows of data should be an iterable of lists, each list with as many elements as the table has fields. So what that means? It means that we should be adding here a list of lists where each list will have the price. So that's why we need to take care how our prices class variable is handled here, because it accepts a list of lists, meaning that, let's show an example here of how this data should be displayed. So just a random code, I'm not going to really save it, but we should have a list, and then each list should be just representing the price. So this might be some value, this could be other value. This is how add rows expects to have the data, the approach of nested lists. And that's what exactly we need to provide to this method. So we are going to take some changes. So in this add prices to list method, we need to add actually a list to that existing list, and this will allow us to have a nested list only if we do this small change here. And now the only thing that we should do in the add rows is basically passing in the nested list cryptocurrency dot prices, and this should be enough, right? And now that we have this, we can basically go ahead and say return pt, meaning that return the table instance back when we call this method. Okay, so now that we have this, let's learn how to use Pretty Table here. So in order to create a method that will be responsible to return a table that we could print it, we need to create a special method that will allow us to access the cryptocurrency.prices. Now we know that this is a data that does not belong to each instance specifically. It is unlike the price or the complete URL, which needs to be taken care specifically per each instance. And that's exactly the reason why we should create a static method. Static method is a method that does something that is globally across the class, and it doesn't really do something that is unique per instance. So I'm going to go ahead and use this decorator that is called static method, and I'm going to name my method here prices table, and I will receive nothing as a parameter. And the way that you can start working with this is by creating an instance of this class that we imported. So we can say something like pt is equal to a pretty table, just a shortened way saying pretty table, and this should receive some arguments. Now we know that each table is divided into columns and rows, so it is understandable that we should provide here the names of the columns that we want to display in the terminal. And the way that it accepts it is by a list of string, where each string represents a different column name. So I will just create one column and I will name it prices. And I'm passing again a list because this is how it expects to have this argument here. Okay, so now that we have this, we should also go ahead and add some rows to the table. And we have a method that we could do this. Now, this add rows also expects the data in a very specific structure, and let me explain how it expects to have the argument here. So when we talk about filling in some rows in a table, then we should provide again a specific data type, and this specific data type should be a list of lists, meaning that, let me write a random code here that I will delete later. It should be a list where each list will represent a different price. So for example, we could have 40,000 as a first cryptocurrency price, we could have 30,000 for the other one, and of course we should differentiate those with a comma. So that's the way that the add rows expects to have its argument. So this means that we need to modify a bit our add prices to list method. If we will only change this to append a list of the self.price, then this will do all the work for us, because every time that an instance is being created, we could call this method, and this method could go ahead and add the list to this existing list. So we will have a list of lists. So that's why we should go here and say cryptocurrency dot prices like that, because this one is already going to include a nested list. Now the only thing that we should do to complete this static method is to return the table. So I'm going to do that, and that's it. That should be enough for this static method. Okay, so I split the files here to show you that we should do something that is important before we go ahead and test the program. Now we remember that we created this method here that goes ahead and adds a list inside the existing list, so we will have a list of lists. But this method is not called anywhere. So the best thing that we should do with this method is to call it whenever the init method executes. Now we know that this method executes for each instance that we create. So that's why it is a perfect idea that every time an instance is created, we should go ahead and add this price information to this prices list. So that's why right after we assign our variables in the init method, we can call the self.addPrices to list method, and this will do the job of grabbing the information about all the prices of all cryptocurrencies. And now that we have this, then now we can go ahead and just create a method that we can call it something like, again, it should be a static method. We can just go ahead and say def show prices, right? And the only thing that we can do here is just returning the result of this prices table here. So we can say print, and we can call this static method from here. So we can say cryptocurrency dot prices table like that. And this is the only thing that I want from this static method, just printing the prices table that is returned from this static method. Okay, so now that we have this, we can close those files and we can only work with the main file, and we can just go ahead and say that we want to display this table. So I can go ahead and use a symbol 2 here, and I can make this equal to the cryptocurrency instance, and symbol is going to be equal to ETH USD now, so we can display in addition cryptocurrency. And now that we have this, we can go ahead and say cryptocurrency dot show prices and sleep it every second. And if we go to our terminal and call this with python main.py, let's see what will be the result. Okay, so you can see that we have a nice visualization here. Although we have some bugs that we need to take care, you can obviously see that the prices are being added continuously. So this means that every time that we sleep a second, we should also do some kind of tear down actions like deleting the elements from the list, so we will not have duplicated data. And those things are things that are fun to take care, and that's exactly what we are going to do now. Okay, so we can go ahead and use here one more static method that will just delete the elements from the list. So I can go ahead and say static method, and I can say clean prices, and the only thing that I want from this method to do is cryptocurrency dot prices, which is the list of the prices, and it should clear everything from here. So there is a method that is belong to a list, and I can just call it and it will delete all the elements from the list. And that's exactly what we are looking to do every time that we sleep a second. So if we go ahead and call this one right after we sleep for a second, so I will say cryptocurrency dot clean prices, then this should be enough to display the table as expected. Now, it also could be a great idea to delete the entire terminal, meaning cleaning the screen every time that we display the updated prices. So that's why we need to kind of execute the CLS command in the terminal. So if we go ahead and do some commands like that and execute CLS in Windows, then it cleans the terminal. So we can execute this command from the terminal with Python code every time that we display the table, so we will have the most updated data, and the only thing that this terminal will show will be a single table. And the way that we can achieve this is going ahead and importing a library that is OS. And the way that you can execute sort of commands like from the terminal, from the shell, is by a special method that is called system that belongs to that library. So I can go ahead and execute this right here. I can say os.system and I can just execute CLS, and you will see what good effect it is going to have right now on our program. Okay, so the next thing that we might want to do in this project is extending our table. Now we know that not only we want to display the prices, obviously we want to display also the symbol name or the crypto name, whatever we want to call it. So that's why we should take some more actions in those methods here. We know that it could be nice to extend the amount of columns in this table, so this means that we should take care and do this in that pretty table instantiation. We can go ahead and pass in here an additional element to the list. We can say something like crypto name, and now it will have 2 columns. Now, if we have 2 columns, it means that each row should include 2 pieces of information. So this means that we should also take some actions in the add prices to list, and I can go ahead and say here that not only I'd like to add the price, I'd also like to add the self.symbol. And now we can go ahead and test our program. Now, in order to have some better results, it could be great to sleep 3 seconds so we can really see the data, because the fact that it disappears every second, it really turns it hard to read the information. So we can go ahead and now say python main.py. Okay, so you can see that it is very nice, the fact that we only need to create an instance of the class that we created, and we will see the data that we expect to see. You can see that the table is very nice and very readable, and now you can go ahead and just add as much as cryptocurrencies as you'd like to. Okay, so you can see that this kind of a project has no limit of how many features you can add to it to extend it and to make it cooler and just publish it as a project in your portfolio. Now, when it comes to a scenario of maintaining passwords or valuable API keys, I told that this is not the best practice to maintain this inside your projects, because if one day you'd like to publish this as a public GitHub project, then everyone will see your API key, for example, in our case. So that's why you could go ahead and accept the API key as an environment variable. Now, an environment variable is basically some bunch of variables that are readable in the runtime of your program that could be read once the program executes. And I have a more detailed video on how environment variables work, because the explanation for it goes much more deeper. You can take a look in the description and just follow with the environment variables video, which I really recommend. Okay, so the way that this is going to work is by changing this one to just nothing. Let me actually cut this from here and add it here as a comment, so we will have in some random location our key. Now, the API key right now is an empty string, and the way that it could receive its value from an environment variable is going to work with the following way. So I'm going to say import OS library again, and I'm going to use some special methods that will be responsible to just use this as an environment variable that should be read from here. So it could be os.environment.get and environ, not actually environment. And I could say here that an environment variable with the name of API key should be injected once the program wants to execute. So before we go ahead and test this out, let me actually, to debug this, show you what will happen with the API key variable if we will go now to the terminal and execute the program as it is. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to run it with python main.py. Excuse me. Let's clean it and do one more time, main.py. So you can see that we have some problems, although we have a lot of exceptions, but I want you to focus on this none here. This comes from the print line of API key, so this means that API key is not equal to any value. Now, the way that you can inject an environment variable is with a command that is called set. Let me clean everything from here and do something like set API key is equal, and this could be equal to the API key that we want to use. So I can go ahead and copy this from here and paste this in like that. Now, this command is different in Linux environment. It should be export, but for Windows we use set. And once we set this one, then now this process has the environment variable of API key being equal to that string. So now if I execute our program, then you can see that this is what we receive in the print line, and you can see that our program is working again. So this is very nice because we maintain our API key outside of our actual code, which is the best practice again when it comes to maintaining secret strings. And now I can just go back to PyCharm and delete the print line of the API key, and there we go. We just have a project that is clean from hard-coded passwords or secrets that we never want to include inside our actual source code. So I hope you enjoyed writing those two Python projects. Be sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed writing those projects, and in addition, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you will not miss videos like this one. And thanks for watching. See you in the next time.